Hello and welcome to Favorite Rugby on Forever Sports. And after quite a strange week last week where we saw Jake White releasing his first column on Rugby Pass, which led to responses from Rassie Erasmus, as well as two little bit of sort of jibes from Springbok assistant coach Wandile Stick, Jake White has come again with another column. He is currently writing a week, it looks like he's writing a week column for Rugby Pass. I don't know how long it's going to be for, if it's just an off-season type thing, or if it's going to be a permanent feature on Rugby Pass. But it's quite interesting, and I think that on the back of what was quite a hectic week with regards to former Springbok coaches going at each other, Rassie Erasmus was calling Jake White out, basically saying that Jake White was sort of insinuating that they shouldn't have rotated, made the changes, and sort of almost saying that it's sort of devalues Springbok jersey, stuff like that. Rassie Erasmus very much quick to respond and say, but you did the same thing and look what happened and stuff like that. And so Stick came out and said he was quite disappointed to hear sort of Jake White's comments and stuff like that. So it was quite an interesting sort of week with regards to how it was all sort of unfolding. And now today we have seen a response from Jake White, not sort of really responding to any of the whiplash that came about from his first column, but with the second column, which I think is a far more measured approach, and I think still has a little bit of controversy with regards to basically questioning whether the Springbok game plan has a backup, whether it's and basically saying that it's too rigid and it needs to be more fluid so that they can't be figured out and stuff like that. But I do think that this week he's gotten the tone a lot more on point than he did a week ago. I think that last week, and some people were saying that it's been blown out of proportion, some people were saying that he was out of line, but I did feel that the way that he came across was quite sort of unfair, I think, towards Jacques Nienaber. Based, I mean, the entire thing was titled "Jake White, you're not a national coach to learn lessons," and I think that whilst maybe traditionally, if that had been about Rassie Erasmus, I don't think people would have been questioning Rassie Erasmus' credentials. But I think that in the current climate and in the situation, which you have to be aware of as a journalist, you have to understand, if you're throwing words out there, you have to understand the context in which they're going out. And the context very much at the moment has always been a very big shadow over whether Jacques Nienaber is in fact qualified or correct to be a Springbok head coach. So when you put a headline out like that, it's very controversial, and it very much feeds into the rhetoric that Jacques Nienaber is not good enough. And whether that's what he intended or not, you've got to be aware of this when you put these things out, because this is the world of media and journalism and stuff like that. And if you're not going to be aware, then you can't, you shouldn't be putting stuff out there, because you do need to be aware of what the situation is. You can't, it's like, that's why they always sort of say that foreign coaches will struggle to coach a South African side, for example, because they don't understand the South African climate, how it works, the intricacies of being South African, and it's a very delicate thing to be able to do, and that's why people have always just sort of said that intrinsically South African coaches who are more in tune with what South Africa is all about have more success. Whether that's going to be always going to be the case, we don't know, but that has something that has been a factor in before. Now, he asked a couple of very good questions, I think Jake White, in this column, and I think, as I said, I think he gets the tone a lot better. I think he makes a lot of mention about the fact that the Springbok system has worked for them. They've had success. And his big sort of criticisms, basically was to say the Springboks do not change. And he's basically saying that the $1 million question is it enough? And I think it comes over here. It says, in this sort of paragraph, he says, obviously, we've seen Ireland playing a different brand of rugby to beat the All Blacks in New Zealand, but the Springboks won't change. Is it going to be good enough? That's the $1 million question. And he doesn't really sort of say whether it is or not. And I quite like that in many ways, because to a certain extent, you obviously want an opinion, but you also need to sit there saying, well, let's actually wait and see. It's too early to just say, well, it won't be good enough. But his issues is that he says that the Springboks are a very rigid side, that we know what you get with them. And that's kind of always been the case, hasn't it? He says, we know that we're a set-piece driven side. We've got a very big pack that'll get us over the advantage line. And we've got a very kicking-dominant, or sort of kicking-led game plan. But his criticisms he's saying that the French pack, for example, have come in leaps and bounds. He's saying that people are a lot better in the air than they were traditionally a year or two ago. So what he's basically saying and insinuating is that there are teams out there that can nullify the Springbok game plan. And what he's saying is that there is no room in the Springbok game plan to be able to adjust to that, to be able to change things a little bit, to be able to sort of bring something new to the table. And I think that, I think to a certain degree, he's got a good point. I think that, again, we are quite early on in the season, in the international season, and I think that we are going to see a bit more progression, where we are going to add more sort of bows to the, or strings to the bow rather. But yeah, and I think what is also probably quite right is that he warned us that New Zealand are going to be a different prospect in a couple of weeks' time. He says he reckons that they will see teams, they will see changes in the side, whether it's personnel changes from a playing perspective, personal changes from a coaching perspective. They are going to see changes. And the thing I think he's bang on right is he said it's all going to come down to the Autumn Nations tests in terms of where we are as a side, because we will be playing Ireland, France, England, as well as Italy. So, you're going to be playing 3 of the top European sides and 2 sides that we haven't played in quite a while in Ireland and in France. So, yeah, I think that, I think it was far less aggressive this week. I think it was far less pointed. I think it was a bit more sort of generic and a bit more just sort of him saying what he thinks, as opposed to sort of deliberately. I think last week, especially for this first one, in trying to be controversial, I think there were a couple of little jibes and little stabs at certain people, at certain instances. There was less of that this time, and I felt that it was an article where you could sit there going, maybe you're exaggerating there, but genuinely I felt that he got most of the things right, and I felt that a lot of what he was saying was pretty fair. And as I said, you don't want to discredit any former Springbok coach, but I do find it ironic a little bit to a certain degree that Jake White's sides were never the most flair-based sides. They were never the most creative and open side. And I think that it's been quite interesting to see that his Bulls side, for example, is a far more positive side than maybe we'd come to expect and we've come to know Jake White for being. And last week in his column, he had basically said that he's coached in France, and in France you have to be able to mix it up, and the Springboks can't do that. And I think that, to a certain degree, I think he has learned quite a lot of that, because we are seeing that with the Bulls, whilst he does have a large pack and he was always renowned. And this is the ironic thing. He was very much renowned for always having a very big pack, always being very dominant in collisions and dominating games on a physical front. So to then sort of basically label Springboks but one-dimensional, I think it's a bit harsh, especially when, as a lot of people would sort of argue, he had to bring in Eddie Jones to try and help add that bit of flair. But at the same time, he did bring in Eddie Jones. He did say, right, well, maybe that's not what I'm particularly good at, so I need to find somebody else to help to come in and try and help us, give us a bit of a plan B, try and help us be a bit more creative. And I think there could be a lot of merit in the Springboks, who never really replaced Swayze de Brain in looking at bringing an attacking consultant, looking at bringing somebody who can help them, find space, a bit more space, and find different options, because we don't currently have a lead backline coach or attack coach, for example, whose sole responsibility is to find a way to break down or way through defenses. So I think there could be justification to actually have that. But I want you to know what you guys think about the column down in the comments below. What do you think your thoughts are of his comments? I don't think we're going to see Rassie Erasmus going after him, anything like that. There wasn't any malicious intent. And I think that hopefully we buried the hatchet with that, because you don't really want to see it going on all the time, do we? I really enjoyed the Rassie Erasmus video that came out with him talking about how valuable the second test was in terms of building a bit of depth, in terms of seeing what other players can do. Very much sort of reaffirming that was always the plan, and that there was still a lot of value, even though we lost, that there was a lot of value in that pass itself. But yeah, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steven. I'll chat to you soon.